Welcome to another presentation from the House of David Fellowship in Richmond, Virginia. I'm Lee Miller. Today we're going to be continuing our series in the book of Acts. We have gotten a little ways down the road. We're really up to 21. If you think about it, there's 28 chapters. That means we're 75% of the way through. Now it could very well be it'll go a little faster now that we've gotten to the point we're at. But even in saying that, I've been trying to be faithful to staying to one chapter for one presentation. Can't do it with Acts 21. It's going to take two presentations. So the next time that I give a presentation, we'll do the second part of that. I'll mention that in this presentation. But let's take a look at what's on tap for today. In this particular chapter, there's several stories about Paul and his travels, the places he went to, as he was working his way to Jerusalem, and he got captured at the end. We'll talk about that. He also met a lot of disciples along the way from different assemblies. The plain reading of the English text strikes again. How many times have we seen that?
How many times?
See, even she knows. Out of the mouth of babes. The first thing that we're going to take is Acts 21:25. Textual criticism, making it say what it does not say. This is one of those situations where you need to know, depending on the version of the Bible you use, because certain versions have been changed, and I'm going to point that out so that you can look it up yourself. And then the second part of what we're going to discuss today, and you might not think that this would be difficult, but we're going to look at the word thousand. And it's going to be like, wow. All right? And then what's going to come in part two that I could not squeeze into this presentation, did James and Paul commit an egregious sin in Acts 21 as regards the vow thing? I'm bringing that in for several reasons. I have done a lot of research in the Christian commentaries. As you know, there's certain ones that I use on a regular basis. Also, I've been out on the web. I've been looking at a lot of material from Christian bloggers and etc. And I'm going to say the consensus is they're very unhappy with Paul and James. Very unhappy. So we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to examine it in the light of the things that we've learned so far. But because of the size of that particular topic, I could not squeeze it into this presentation and do a fair job. So that's why we're going to move it to the second presentation. All right, so verses 1 through 16, Paul travels to Jerusalem, visiting with many disciples along the way. In verses 17 through 27, Paul meets with James and the elders. And in verses 28 through 40, Paul's captured at the temple. Eventually, he's allowed to speak, intending to make his defense for what is going on. Now, basically, I have just finished chapter 21. But we are going to look at some things in detail. All right, so throughout our discussion of the book of Acts, we found a few places where a better English translation really helps to clarify some of the goings-ons. And it's not just the book of Acts. There's some other places that we've seen throughout the scriptures where sometimes the English translation is just plain lacking. Sometimes it's a mistake. Sometimes it is a, well, I didn't know error. I'm okay with that. And then there are other times when I think they knew. But I'm not going to judge intent. I'm just, I'm going to be a good guy. But I am going to challenge, if you don't put down what the text, the underlying Greek or Hebrew text says, I'm going to challenge you. So just get ready. It's always going to be that way. That's the mandate of Proverbs 18:17. All right, so anyway, I feel like there's some places where a better English translation helps us understand the text, and you're going to, I hope, agree with me at the end of this presentation when I show you two of them. And this is just a personal whining. I wanted to get my whining out of the way early in the presentation. I feel like we need a better solution than we have now, and I've been considering some options as regards our unification initiative. Here's what pops up. I will be studying, in this particular case, as you know, we're looking at the book of Acts as a historical document. So we're going through, we're walking through, and then I'll find something and go, oh, this is not as clear as I would like for it to be. So I would write up something. Sometimes I even translate the verse myself and share my translation with you so you can see what I'm thinking. But I don't have a place to store that yet. And so I have been thinking about some things that might help in that manner. So I just wanted to let you know that it's not a dead-end street for me. It's just not far enough along. All right, so let's get into Acts 21:25. I've entitled this section, Perpetrating the False Narrative. One of the things that we find sometimes in the text, especially when you work with editorial committees that are mostly Protestant Christian, and this would include commentators in their commentaries, you can see certain things that are said, and I'm going to show you because I'm going to quote the commentaries themselves so that you can see what I am talking about and why I get so upset about it. From the KJV, the 1769 version, and yes, the KJV has changed many times since 1769. I'm not using the 1611 because it's like impossible to read. They didn't even have the letter J back then, so it's like, what? Anyway, this is the 1769 version. As touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from strangle, from fornication. Now, what words should not be in this English translation because they're not in the underlying Greek text? What words should be removed? The answer is, observe no such thing, save only. So now I'm going to offer up that verse, and let's read it with those words missing. As touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from strangle, and from fornication. Now you're going, okay, wait a minute, what was the first one? Okay, here's the first one. That they observe no such thing, except they only keep for themselves these four. And this is with it gone. We've written and concluded that they need to keep themselves from these four. So there is a difference. In the Greek, the message is to abstain from four practices, not to observe four commandments. By putting that additional English into the text, one could come away with, oh, these are the only four we had to do. That's what save only means in KJV language. All right, let's keep going. Nothing in the text, and I'm talking about the underlying Greek text, nothing in that text itself suggests that the council required observance of only these four. And remember, this is a quote of what took place in Acts 15. In the part that James had in Luke's restating later in chapter 15, and this is the third statement of it. And here, they change it. Isn't that interesting? But that is the KJV 1769. Since then, the KJV has acknowledged those words do not exist in the Greek text, and they have changed their published translation. So I want to honor that. Just want to let you know. But, you know, I use the Companion Bible a lot. The Companion Bible is the 1769 KJV. So it doesn't matter how many things they publish. I'm still using the 1769 KJV, and I have to fight through this on a daily basis. So wanted to let you know that. So since there's nothing in the Greek, here's my statement on this. If we already believe that abstaining from the four is the equivalent of all that's required. Okay, let me restate that again. I wish I could do a translation of that sentence in English, but this is the best I've got. If we already believe that abstaining from the four means we only have to do those four, then it would be possible to translate the verse that way. But here is what we need to take note of. It requires a pre-theological commitment to a two-Torah view. In other words, the Jews got to keep it all, but the Gentiles do not have to keep love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, because it's not in the list of four. They do not have to keep love your neighbor as yourself, because that's not in the list of 4. And when you talk to them, because I have, they'll say, well, no, Paul added a whole bunch back. Yeah. I'm just saying. It depends on how we approach the text. Once again, we find that our perception of what was actually transpiring in the accounts of Acts depends not so much on what the text says as it depends on what we already believe about the earliest Messianic community. That's the dangerous place we find ourselves in. You come to the text, and I'm not saying I don't. Everybody comes to the text. They've got something in their mind. They've got something they think. Nobody comes to the text with a blank slate. It just doesn't happen. It's not humanly possible. So you got something working. So you're going to read the text and you're going to run it through that filter. That's what you do. That's what we all do. That's called being human. Depending on what you think happened is the filter you're going to run the book of Acts through. And that's been the problem for the almost last 2,000 years. Let me continue. We must admit that biased English translations, which I will show you, that read into the text what a theological editorial committee's doctrinal belief was, also impacts us. Let me give you an example. I had complained many years ago about the NIV. In a passage that we've had to deal with, which is Colossians 2, 16 and 17, the NIV changes the verb from present tense to past tense. And in their book explaining the translation of the NIV, they come right out and say there were some times when the doctrinal position of the editorial committee disagreed with what the underlying Greek text said, so we changed it to match our doctrine. But here's the problem. They didn't put it in italics. There's no asterisk. There's nothing to tell me they did that. If I don't come in knowing what I'm reading, and 99% of the people don't know what they're reading, you can change the verb from present tense to past tense, and you can change the verb into a noun, and you can do all these other things, and I will never know. I've got a problem with that. You're going to change the text? I really want you to help me by telling me that you're changing. Listen, you want to change the text? Fine, change the text. I change the text. But I tell you when I've changed the text, because I'm trying to read the text in such a way that it brings into play things about the culture, context, the lives of the people, blah, 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 into that passage so that it's fuller in understanding. And I tell you I'm going to do this. You're going to change the text? I need you to tell me. If you're not going to tell me, I'm going to be unhappy. This is my unhappy face. Okay? For most of us, what we believe about the earliest Messianic community is not a reflection of what actually happened, but rather the importation of what we have experienced in our churches. That's how I approached it when I came out, when I switched over. That's all I had. Listen, pulling this all out, setting it on the table and go through it one at a time, that doesn't happen in a day. So I may have looked at a few things, but I got a bunch of stuff up there that still needs to be rummaged through. I'm a hoarder. And that's the problem. We've been taught that the earliest community that followed the Messiah became Christian and stopped being Jewish. That means the community looked like what we experienced in the Protestant Christian church. What we experience today when I went to the Baptist church is what took place in the first century, 30 AD, is what I was taught. And I got a quote. I hope I put it in here. I was thinking about putting it in here. I hope I put it in here. Then, with that mindset of whatever I'm reading in the book of Acts is what my Baptist church is doing, we read into the text what we believe to be true, and the result is a complete misunderstanding of what's going on. And it's not just the book of Acts where we do this. There's some other places where we do this too. But Acts being the historical narrative that it is, it's so easy after X number of centuries of being told this is what took place in the first century, that I am now programmed. I drank all the Kool-Aid, all the flavors, because it may not have been healthy, but I liked it. Okay. So anyway, I drank all the Kool-Aid. I got that down. So when I came to Acts, piece of cake. Yeah, I mean, I could just go on. All right, let's take it step by step. The Roman Catholic Church, or the Protestant Christian Church, was not formed in Acts 2. You can't even have that conversation with a Protestant Christian. You can't even have the conversation. And here's another one. What does the word conversion mean? There weren't any conversions from one religious system to another, but you read the commentaries and it's like, so here in the first century, Acts chapter 2, all these Jews were converted. Really? Converted? You know, if a person's in Islam and they become a Protestant Christian, okay, they converted. But when a Jew who is looking for a Messiah is informed that the Messiah has come and they go, oh, you're right, that ain't a conversion. That's a fulfillment of who you are. So, you know, just the acknowledgement that Yeshua was indeed the appointed one, the Messiah. Look at what makes up the way. Jews, proselytes, priests, I'll mention later, and eventually some Gentiles were added. All the members followed Torah in some form or another. That's right there in Acts. You see it, and I'm going to bring it out. I've already brought it out, and I'm going to bring more of it out. There was never any question about leaving the Jewish way of life. I don't see that in the text anywhere. When somebody comes to a knowledge that Yeshua is the Messiah, is there anything that you have read that says, and so they were preparing to leave their Jewish way of life? Have you ever seen that in the text? No. You have to read it into the text because you've been pre-programmed to believe that's true. So it's really easy. So, oh, they converted to being a Christian. Oh, okay. Virtually nothing that we experience in the practice of the church today was part of the communities of Acts. I want to share with you, I did have the quote, I put it right here. No, I'm sorry, it looked like the quote, it's not the quote. The quote's coming, or I'm going to tell it to you whether it's coming or not. Okay? Every time we read our Christian heritage into the text, we violate the context and culture of the original. So this is the solution. But only the people who are thinking this way, look at this. You want to understand Acts, you got to think like the first century Jews who wrote it, who heard it, and who read it. You can't read Acts like a 21st century Protestant Christian because it's not going to go well. Now, well, I was raised believing that the book of Acts contained the earliest stories of the Protestant Christian church. That's how I was raised. And to give you the example, this is the definitive example. Look it up in the dictionary. Here's the example you will see. I remember reading once that Jesus was a good Christian boy who went to Sunday school every Sunday. Was the opening page of my Sunday school document. Wow. Now at the time, being clueless, okay, was my answer. Today, I would want to ask the author of this booklet if he could show me anything in the text that gave him this conclusion. Okay, what can I say? Little did I know that it actually contained the stories of another denomination of Judaism. You know, there was over a half dozen different denominations of Judaism. We got our Baptists and Methodists and Episcopalian and Pentecostal and there's some others. Presbyterian, I'm sure there's more. Well, in Judaism, there was a bunch of different denominations. And so when Yeshua came along, and you want to get a cool reading of Matthew 16? Upon this rock, I will build my denomination. How about that? Because that's exactly what it was, and that's exactly what he did. It was another sect, ended up taking on the name The Way, and it was simply another denomination within a group of denominations that were all Jewish in the first century. Now, of course, today, denomination has a weight of, well, not a good weight. But that's the truth of it. All right, let's keep going. I'm dragging on here. Christianity came into existence 100 years later and rejected everything Jewish that it could. When we get to that point, I'm going to show you how they redefined the new religion so that they could remove everything that was Jewish. I'm just going to take you through the steps. You'll see the documents, and it's right there. They say this, and they say this, and they say this. So the whole creation was to create something that was not Judaism. All you got to do is read the documents. The evidence is there. We'll get into that after we finish the book of Acts. All right. The next part, word of the day. The word of the day is thousands. All right, so let's go. Let's take a look. Here's the Greek from Freiburg. This is the word CHILIAS as a number. This is Freiburg's definition. It's as a number, 1,000. That's what it means, 1,000. If it was plural, of course, it'd be thousands. Now, in Genesis 20:16, I'm giving you some examples from Tanakh and from the New Testament so that you can see how the word's used. Some of these you have already read yourself, and you go, I've read that before. Genesis 20:16, and unto Sarah he, this is the king, Abimelech, said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. This is the Greek word in that text. Numbers 25:9, and those that died in the plague were 20 and 4,000. Now let me just say, we'll get into this later, but sometimes the Greek will break it up into the word 20, the word 4, and the word 1,000. So you got 3 words to be 24,000. Then sometimes they'll combine the 20 and the 4. So you got 24,000. So it just depends. And then some of the smaller ones, like 4,000, they actually have a word for 4,000. It's not 4,000. So you got to look. It may not even be important, but I'm just wanted you to know that. In this case, it's the word 20 and the word 4 and the word 1,000. Let's go to Deuteronomy 7 and 9. Know therefore that Yahweh thy Elohim, he is Elohim, the faithful Elohim, which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. There's the word again. You've heard this. You've read it. You've seen it. You've talked about it. How should one chase 1,000 and to put 10,000 to flight? Now, in this case, it's not 10 in the word 1,000. That's why I didn't highlight it. It's a different word. We'll talk about that later. But here, how should one chase 1,000? It's that word. Joshua. Joshua arose and all the people of war to go up against Ai, and Joshua chose out 30,000. Pretty clear. Judges. And they slew of Moab at that time about 10,000. Psalm 84. For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. Of course, there's an ellipses here. We don't know 1,000 what's. I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. But once again, a day in his courts is better than maybe 1,000 of not being with God. Could be. But anyway, that's our Greek word. Let's look at 1 Samuel. The Philistines put themselves in array against Israel, and when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000. See how consistent this is? And everybody translates these correctly. That's the mystery. Psalm 91:7. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand. But notice that 10,000 is not highlighted because it's not 10,000. It's actually a different word. So that's why 1,000 is highlighted there. Psalm 90, verse 4. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Have you seen that before? Psalm 105. He hath remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations. That's quite a few. Same word. You see how consistent this is. Daniel. From the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,000 and blah, blah, blah days. Same Greek word. 1,000. Let's go New Testament. Luke 14. Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consulted whether he be able with 10,000, that's 10,000, to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000. Okay? 2 Peter 3:8, but beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. You're familiar with most of these. How about this set? And he laid hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. And when the 1,000 years were finished, Satan is released from his prison. Now, let's go to the book of Acts. All right, let's get to our passage, because you are satisfied that, yeah, okay, these people are familiar with the Greek word for 1,000, and they have used it many times, and they seem to have a handle on it. All right? So let's see what the problem is. Why am I on my soapbox today? All right. Acts 19:19. Many of them also which used curious arts, we studied this not too long ago, brought their books together and burned them before all men. And they counted the price of them and found it 50,000 pieces of silver. Is this the same word? Nope. Not the same word. You would think it could be 50 and then our word for 1,000, but it's not the same word. It's a completely different word, which I will show you in a minute. But 19:19 is not the verse that we're looking at. The verse we're looking at is 21:20 because we're in chapter 21. So let's go to chapter 21, verse 20. It says, when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous for the law. 21:20. Now, is that the same word? Nope. Not the same word. Isn't that interesting? They have gotten it right so often, but they didn't get it right this one time. Thousands is used. Can I literally say thousands of times? No. But I can figuratively say 1,000 is used thousands of times. And they got them all right except for one. Why? That's the question inquiring minds want to know. What's the Greek word here? M-U-R-I-A-S. Not C-H-I-L-I-A-S. You know it in English as myriads. If you look it up in Strong's, that's how they spell it in English. All right, so let's go look at the use of this word. Got to make my case. In Genesis 24, verse 60, and they blessed Rebekah and said to her, May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s. That's the word. Deuteronomy 32:30. How should one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight? That's the word. Psalm 91. 1,000 shall fall at thy side and 10,000 at thy right hand. That's the word. Luke 12. In the meantime, when there were gathered together an innumerable multitude of people, that's the word. Hebrews. But you've come into the Mount Zion, unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels. That's the word. Jude. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s, plural, of his saints. That's the word. Revelation 5. Beheld, I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000. That's the word. Revelation 9:16. The number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. See, they're getting this. They're getting this. There's no mystery here. Acts 19:19. Many of them which used curious arts brought their books together, burned them, and they counted the pieces of silver and found it 5 10,000s, which is 50,000. Okay. In the Greek, they got this right. Because the Greek text says 5 10,000s. That's 50,000. So, now, let's do a little summary here. 10,000 was used 6 times in my examples. Innumerable was used twice. So let's go to Acts 21:20. That's our verse. When they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe. That's not the word. All the other ones are correct except for this one. Why is that? Here's Freiberg. The word, literally, as a number, means 10,000. In the plural, in a more general sense of very large numbers, myriads, countless thousands. We saw 2 places where the KJV translated innumerable. So that's a good large number. All right. But I don't want to just stop with Freiberg. Let's go with Louw-Nida. 10,000, countless. Little Scott, a number of 10,000. Moulton and Milligan, 10,000. All right, so it sounds like the Protestant Christian Greek scholars writing the dictionaries have got it, right? Sounds like they've got it. Now let's go to the International Critical Commentary and take a look. How many myriads of Jews there are which believe? All right, that's the Greek. Here is the International Critical Commentary quoting Dr. Baur, Barr, or something else, supposes that the words are a gloss. Oh, okay, so in this one case throughout all of Scripture, putting myriads is the wrong thing to do. Somebody put that in the text. It really shouldn't be that. It should be the other word. And so therefore, we can just discard that. All right? Suppose the words are a gloss and that the Jewish multitude in Jerusalem in general are spoken of and not merely those who believed. Really? Can we go back up to the second bullet on this slide? How many myriads of Jews there are which believe? So it's not just myriads he's got a problem with. He's got a problem with the fact that James is telling Paul about all the people who believed versus telling Paul about all the people who are alive that are Jewish in Israel, in Jerusalem, in which a whole bunch of them don't believe. Really? Really? I really buy this? I don't think so. Here is the quote. Here's the source for that. Okay, continuing ICC. Dr. Zeller thinks that there's an exaggeration on the part of the author. Funny. So far, Luke hasn't exaggerated anything. We've been breaking down the numbers. I'm going to break them down again just as a review. But here, Luke exaggerated the number. Okay. He puts into the mouth of James what could only be true of Jewish Christians throughout the world taken collectively. But you know, there's a problem with that. And I'm going to see if I cover that later. Here's the reference for that. Now, back to the ICC. I want to discuss something that we are well familiar with in this century. It's called new math. This is not fun with math. This is new math. Now, in Volume 1 of the ICC, it's a 2-volume set for Acts, Acts discussion of 241, which we covered, at page 113, they write, and about 3,000 souls. And this is after Peter's talking to the people, and the text says about 3,000 souls came into the faith, or something to that. So ICC acknowledges that. In their commentary, there were 3,000 souls. All right? Now, in Volume 2 of the ICC, page 273, they say, now we are informed that about 20 years before this, remember we're going back in time now, we're talking Acts 21, going back 20 years, they're saying the Jewish Christians at Jerusalem amounted to 5,000. Okay, so they just admitted in Volume 1 that we got 3, And then they say that 20 years earlier, we had 5. That's 2 additional. And they quote Acts 4:4. Let's examine this. In 2:41, it says there were 3. In 4:4, it says that there were 5,000 added of men. Of course, all these men were single, so there were no wives or children. There were no households. Yeah, I'm buying that. Definitely buying that. 5:14, large number of persons. 6:1, the number of disciples multiplied. What does that mean? 6:7a, the number of disciples multiplied in Jerusalem greatly. A great company of priests were obedient to the faith. All the assemblies of the way were multiplied. Now we're not talking just Jerusalem, we're talking all the known world. Many believed. Great numbers believed and turned to Yeshua. Much people added to Yeshua. The way assemblies increased in number daily. What does that mean? Some believed, and a great multitude of Greeks. Many believed plus many Greeks. Many of the Corinthians believed, and many believed. And do we really think that Luke included every increase? And so my question is, does all of this equal 5,000? I don't know. I'm struggling with that. Really, struggling with that. All right, let's continue with new math. The Net Bible, here's their notes. But many of those who had listened to the message believed, and the number of the men came to about 5,000. Number of the men came to about 5,000. So let's do the math. If there were 3,000 and you add 5,000, what do you get? 5,000. Which is exactly what the ICC said. The total Jews were 5,000 20 years ago. But nobody else joined the church in Jerusalem over that 20 years. Really? Are they reading the same book of Acts I'm reading? Because if they are, I have a concern that I don't even know what it is. Let's see what they say. It's very probable that many of these Jewish converts, I love this, it's so good. Many of these Jewish converts differed from other Jews only in confessing that Yeshua was the Messiah. Here we have the de facto definition of what a conversion is. Jews believed that Yeshua was the Messiah. The ICC declares it in their commentary. If only they had stopped there. But no. I pray that it from your mouth to your ears, but I don't know. Sometimes it's like crossing the Pacific. Here's what they say. Right after that, they say, but these Jews who confessed that Yeshua was the Messiah either relapsed in Judaism or, separating themselves from the Christian church, formed a Jewish Christian sect of their own. So here, you know what I said? How many things are wrong with this quote? I'm sorry. I do not mean to be abusive. It's hard to speak. Moving on. These Jewish Christians, although baptized and acknowledging Yeshua as the Messiah, yet held by the Mosaic law, they diligently observed its peculiar rites. Okay, let's denigrate what God designed. Yeah, that sounds good. Once again, this is using the English text to influence readers who do not read critically. They're going to go, oh yeah, the horrible things they had to do at the Tabernacle of Moses, that was terrible. Those were just terrible. That's what you get from that passage. That's unfair. Continuing their quote, their religion was not pure Christianity, but a mixture of Judaism and Christianity. You see what I'm saying? They got the first paragraph right, And everything after that, they got wrong. Sometimes I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed. All right, back to James. You see, brother, there are tens of thousands of Jews who have come to believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. That's the correct translation, because it's plural. There weren't thousands, there were 10,000s plural of Jews who had come to believe that Yeshua is Messiah. Now, here's what we can do. Tens of thousands is a mistake, so let's cast that out and plug in something else. So I'll just put in thousands. And this is talking about all the Jews in Jerusalem, so let's cast out the part that says that these are the ones that came to believe in Yeshua, because nobody cares about that. And that's how they are able to twist this down to make it say there are thousands of Jews in Jerusalem. That is their translation. Brother, there are thousands of Jews in Jerusalem. Gosh, Paul says, I didn't know that. Really? Okay. Continue in my review. These people are still Jewish. Anybody take note of that? They haven't stopped being Jews. They haven't stopped being Jewish in their outlook of life. As we went through the chapters, when there was an event that took place which talked about their Jewish heritage, I brought it out so you could see, oh yeah, that was part of the culture of the time. This is what they did. And they were still doing it. Isn't that interesting? If just in Jerusalem, then a large number of those who strictly hold to the Torah as the expression of the divine will is a huge problem. So this is telling me that Paul went out to all of these countries and was sharing about whatever he was sharing with, and these people have now all come into Jerusalem to celebrate a feast, which, by the way, the text doesn't say anything about, so we're just making this up as we go, but that's what they did, so that's why I'm quoting it. A large number of these people are still holding the Torah as the expression of the divine will. That should have been long gone, but that's what the text said. Here's my statement about the feast. Feast time where a lot of folks have come in from out of town, that means that a large number of Jews outside are still Jews. Notice what James said. He didn't say, brother, I want to tell... Now remember, this is not even what the text says. This is what the commentators say, that the correct translation should be, Paul, look at all the Jews that are in Jerusalem celebrating the feast. That's how they want to translate it. And here, if that's the case, they're not Jews. These people that came in, they're not Christians. They're still Jewish. Because James didn't say, look at all the Christians in Jerusalem. You notice he didn't say that? And the bigger problem to deal with is that they're observing Torah. What did we talk about James? Sent his letter out early, could be 40 AD. Getting on people to pull it together. You know what to do, now you have to go do it. Because knowing what to do and not doing it makes you a zombie. We discussed that. Zombies in the millennial kingdom. We've already reviewed that. So get it together. So now, 20 years later, these people are zealous for observing the Torah according to how Yeshua interpreted it. But we need to change that, because this just can't be true. There can't be that many people in Jerusalem. There can't be tens of thousands. Or there can't be 10,000s, plural, minimum 20. There can't be. There's just not enough people in Jerusalem to do that. Really? Well, then let's find out. In the first century, they might be referred to as Yeshuic Messianic Jews. I didn't want to refer to them as Messianic Jews because that's a problem. We have Messianic Judaism here, and that's not the way as we see the way in Acts. Okay? And the reason I did this, Yeshuic Messianics, because in the 2nd century, when we get to studying that, there's the Bar Kokhba Messianic Jews. So there's a whole new denomination created in the 2nd century of Jews who believe in a Messiah. So that's why I prefaced it with that. Now, and of course I said this, no mention of them having become Christians. And there's more. They're all zealous for the law. But what does the Greek says? It says they are all zealots as regards the law. So let me tell you about that. There was a denomination called zealots. They weren't that denomination, but the word also has the meaning of a person who is so completely engaged with whatever it is that they are engaged with. It's just, when you see them, you know, oh, those must be zealots. And so the word is being used to describe people who are now understanding that the Torah still is the expression of the divine will, and they are after it in all the detail that James requested in his letter. That is not brought out in the English, but it is existing in the Greek. And I put it over here. This is how I would phrase it. Walking, talking examples of Torah living. They're not just a few leftovers from prior Jewish rituals, as some Christian commentators would have us believe. All of these Jews are living affirmations of the central place of the Torah as interpreted by Yeshua. That's what the word means. Using the actual Greek word meaning, instead of using thousand, a minimum of two 10,000s would be 20,000. Could be more, because you saw the numbers. I mean, at chapter 4 of Acts we got 8, if all those guys are single. And we want to believe that all 5,000 of those Jews were single. Okay? What if they weren't? What if they were married and had 2 kids? Well, now we got 23,000. And we got the whole rest of Acts before we get to the Jerusalem meeting in chapter 21. So, you know, this is possible. So I had to, before I could settle myself on this, I had one more thing I had to look at, which I'm going to share with you, and that was the approximate population of Jerusalem from 4 BC to 70 AD. So I had to do some research on this, and I'm going to share just a little bit of it so you can see what I got. From the Biblical Archaeology Review, I went to the library and took a picture of the journal. Here's the table of contents, and this is what we're looking at from 1978. It's called Estimating the Population of Ancient Jerusalem. The reason this was written at that time is because they had developed a new means to interpret population based on archaeological finds, and they break it down in the journal article, which I have at home if anybody wants to read it. Okay? But I did put a few points in here. Based on 400 acres in Jerusalem and a density of 160 to 200 persons per acre, which sounds crowded because we're not quite that crowded, they estimate the population in Jerusalem at 80,000 during that time frame. That means that at least 1 out of every 4 and possibly 1 out of every 3 other folk you met on the street or in the grocery store were doing Torah and believing that Yeshua was the Messiah. How exciting must that have been? And then, later on, which we'll get to, there was a huge increase after the temple was destroyed, because he prophesied the temple would be destroyed. He described it in detail. When it happened, there was a huge influx, but we're not there yet. We will get there. Then I went to another work. This is by one of my favorite authors, Richard Bachman. This is the Book of Acts in its first century setting, 6-volume series. Here is volume 4, which I used. Anybody wants to look? He went through trying to break down what was taking place, reviewing every single piece of research in a book or a journal article that talked about population estimations in Jerusalem in the first century. And the one he focused on most was the one from Broshi. And it says here, he concurs with Broshi's higher number over Jeremias, another scholar in 1943, who had a different way of doing population and said that the maximum number of people in Jerusalem in the first century was 30,000. So the scholars who are using that work are saying there's no way it could be 10,000, so it's got to be a mistake in the text. Of course, you can't explain 3,000 plus 5,000 equals 5,000. That's still a struggle. But the way I'm reading this, can you imagine, because this ain't the way it is today for us in exile, it's not 1 in 3 of every person we meet on the street that is observing Torah and believes Yeshua is the Messiah. That ain't the case. But it was for them, and even if it was only 1 out of 4, I think the numbers are very exciting. So, here again, I don't like that they didn't translate the word correctly this one and only time throughout all of Scripture. They chose to not translate it correctly here. Why? And you didn't even tell me. There you go. All right. Next. Part 2. Did Paul and James commit an egregious sin in Acts 21 as regards the vow thing? We will break that down the next time I give a presentation that deals with the book of Acts. All right, so that is all I have. Thank you so much for being present for this presentation.